Hi, welcome back or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Laura. Hi, hello, welcome. Today, well first, how good is this good boy? He's just chewing a sweet potato. He's so good. Anyway, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be doing a update, a check-in on my like no pan left behind kind of thing that I'm trying to do this year with all of my eyeshadow palettes. This is exclusive to my eyeshadow palettes. Singles are very daunting. So I'm trying my best to rotate through my singles, but I'm not tracking. I have my bullet journal here. I have a spread in here that I put together of palette usage. I'm happy that there's a lot of blue and pink. I'm color coordinating it with a color that I deem appropriate for the season. So winter was blue, spring was pink. I think summer is going to be orange or yellow. I haven't decided yet. So if you have a preference on what color you would like to see, or green, maybe green would be fun. Maybe green. But we're gonna go over the palettes that I've used over the past quarter, but I want to start with just kind of a walk down memory lane if you don't remember. So I'm gonna talk about quickly the palettes that I used completely in Q1. So from January to March, these are the four palettes that I used every single shade in the first 3 months of the year. So no particular order. I used every shade in a combined Natasha Denona palette. This Haley had sent me 2 separate 5-pan palettes. They had repeat They had repeat shades in it, so I combined them into one palette and then gifted the other 5-pan to my mother-in-law. So I used every single shade in this like hodgepodge of a palette. That was pretty darn exciting. I also used every single shade in my Dreamy 2 palette by Nabla. I'm not going to open this. It has like, it's in the outer packaging and everything, so you've probably seen this before. Additionally, I used every single shade in my Tartist Pro palette. I got a couple pans in this palette in Q1. That was exciting. The last palette exclusively used in Q1 that I used every single shade in was my Anastasia Prism palette. And that's what that guy looks like. Then we also used the majority of this palette in Q1, and that is the Fantasy Cosmetica Druid palette. And I apologize. I totally dropped a ball on my giveaway. I will be picking the winner this week, and then you'll have a week to reach out to get your prize. So I will be doing that this week. I have a couple days off in a row, and I've just been very tired. So I'll have a couple days off later this week, and I will pick the winner for the Druid palette also. But I used every single shade except for this multi-duochrome and this blue. So now the middle of the road palettes are the palettes that I used both in Q1 and Q2. I think all of these have had every single shade used, but let me just double check. Okay, so I have 2 palettes in my used both in Q1 and Q2 that only had a couple shades used, and it's kind of embarrassing that they only had a couple shades used. The first one is my Sailor Moon Pretty Guardian palette in collaboration with ColourPop. I only used a handful of these shades within the past 2 months. Then another palette that is just like a behemoth, and I really just didn't feel like reaching for every shade, if I'm being quite honest, is the ColourPop Bare Necessities palette. This was in 2 rotations, or is currently in a pan those eyeshadows, but maybe it got rolled out. I don't remember. I don't know when you're seeing this video versus when I have my update going. Yeah, so I've used over half of the palette. I used 19 out of the 30 shades in this. So I'm pretty happy with the usage that I did, but there's like predominantly a lot of these darker tones and then like just kind of random like mattes and shimmers in the rest of the palette that I need to use. Now we have a small stack of palettes that I used both in Q1 and Q2 that I used every single shade in, and the first one is my Pan That palette. I'm not going to open this because I don't want spoilers. The update should be coming in about a week. But every shade was used in this. There's only 5 shades left, but every shade was used this quarter and last quarter. I used it all the way up. And then another one that was in my Pan Those eyeshadows is the Adept Cosmetics Plain Jane palette. I used every single shade in this palette as well. You can definitely see that it looks worn. Not super well loved, but that I've used it. Then another behemoth palette. This is the Natasha Denona Purple Blue palette. This is in my in my BYOP that I haven't updated quite yet, but I still have that shade. This was in my Project Level Up, so it's no surprise that I did have to reach for every single shade in this palette. So I did do that. And the last combined usage between Q1 and Q2 that was fully used was my Glam Light Ice Cream Dream palette. Now this was in 3 rotations of my Pan Those Eyeshadows, and we hit pan in 1, 2, 3, and then we got a 4th pan that was just a bonus. We used every single shade in this. It's a color lover's dream of a palette. Moving on to the palettes exclusively used within the past 3 months. So that is April, May, and June. I'm filming this on June 30th, so this is the absolute last day that I could have worn these palettes to count towards like the usage for Q2. So we're gonna start with palettes that I used but haven't used every single shade in. Starting things off with one of my favorite newest palettes is the Avocado Toast. Haley sent this to me. Again, thank you, Haley, as always. This is what this beauty looks like. I haven't used every single shade in it. I'm missing 4 shades, so I'm super close. We have these 2, this, and this. This I am wearing in my eye look today also. I have on this Holy Moly Guac Green Juice in my look today in this. Another palette that I got a lot of my use out of today is a palette that I've never used. I've only swatched it. This was another gift from Haley. This is the Beauty Bakerie Bite Size I'm with the Cookie Baking Crew. Man, I don't know how long the name of this palette annoys me, but I ended up using a lot of the shades in this palette today. This one, this guy, and then these 2 down here I used in my look today. So lots of shades from this on my eye look today. I only have the warmer tones left, which will be super easy to get the use out of. Then a couple that are going in my Pan Those eyeshadows. I'm not going to pull them out of the packaging just because it's annoying. I've only used I've used 4 shades out of this palette. One of the shades I did use last quarter, but for the most part, it really counts towards, like, I've majority used it this quarter. So that is the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette, that guy. Then I have a Natasha Denona Zendo palette, and I've only used 2 shades in this palette within the past quarter, mainly because it is just rolled into my Pan Those eyeshadows. So I will continue to get the use out of them. I'm hoping to use every single shade in these 2 palettes within the next quarter. I think that that's totally doable. So 2 palettes that I haven't used until I did that palette bingo, like the multi-palette bingo using the Wood I repurchased palettes. And I had 2 Kaleidos palettes. So the Astro Pink palette, which is super pretty, but I ended up only using 2 shades in this palette. These 2 here, it was in that look that I did. Then there's 5 more shades in this one, and that is the Lunar Lavender palette. Again, thank you, Haley, for this palette. And I only used the very dark brown because it was, again, the palette bingo that required it. So these are super easy to reach for every shade because it's not a super big palette. So I'm not concerned that I won't be able to do it. It's just like finding the time and like stepping away from my Pan Those eyeshadows. Now we go to, oh man, I had 5 palettes. 5 palettes that I used every single shade out of this quarter, which is really nice because we only had 4 from Q1 exclusively. So now we have 5 from Q2 exclusively. So kicking it off with the palettes I completely used within the second quarter of the year. So again, April, May, and June. I am going to kick it off on like the same train, and that is a Kaleidos palette as well. This is the Sci-Fi Green palette. Now, if you didn't watch my Project Level Up video, I did actually end up rolling this into my Project Level Up only to veto it out of that project because there's too many similar shades to my Subculture. These greens, this yellow, and it just was too much overlap for me to really feel like I would get use out of Subculture and this at the same time. So my caveat to that was I was going to use every single shade in this palette, and I did, which I'm very happy to report in this video that I was able to reach for every single shade this past 3 months. Speaking of Project Level Up, I have this guy, and this, I don't know why I hold it like that. This guy is my Going Coconuts palette by ColourPop. This rolled into my Project Level Up, and I did have a spoiler, and then I dropped this palette, and the shade crumbled, and I had to repress it. and then another shade kind of like popped out and I had to smush that back in. So this is a little bit delicate now, but I am happy to kind of be reaching for it and everything like that. So every single shade in here was touched within the quarter. Another one that I was actually quite surprised that I reached for every time is my Shroud Cosmetics Creepy Cute palette. And this is a really beautiful palette, if I'm being quite honest. I thought I was going to be able to hit pan and planchette when I had my Natasha Denona Purple Blue palette out. I was kind of reaching for this in hopes to like hit pan in it as well. I'm so close. There is a humongous dip in there. I feel like I could use it 3 more times and probably get pan. So I should just focus on that, if I'm being quite honest. I used every single shade in my Natasha Denona Love palette. I rolled this into a Shop My Stash in, I think it was April, and I used every single shade and then ended up rolling this into my Pan Those eyeshadows. It has since rolled out, but I used every single shade in this beautiful palette. I'm so happy. And then the very last palette that I used every single shade, I used the last shade that I needed to today. I made sure I used all of the other shades yesterday in like a very pretty warm toned eye look, but this beauty, guys, this beauty. Another one that Haley had sent me, this is the Oden's Eye Alva palette, and that is what this beauty looks like. And I am actually wearing this shade Lilac tapped over all of the green today. It's more of a transparent base with like a bunch of multi-dimension glitter in it, and one of the lid shades that I used had like kind of purpley glitters in it, so I figured I could just tap that guy on top of it, and it to me looks fantastic. I'm very happy with how my eye look turned out today. Very Ariel with like the red hair, the green. I'm feeling very under the sea right now. Let me count all of the palettes that I use. I usually have statistics in here and I don't have them written down right now. So I just wrote all of my statistics down for Q2, and I have some pretty exciting things to share with you. I'm just going to have things kind of floating on the screen as I'm talking about them. So first and foremost, the total number of my palettes has not changed. We're still at 42 palettes, but I will say the number of palettes with pan in it has increased by 2. So we were at 19 last quarter. This quarter, we're at 21 palettes have pan in them now, which is really exciting. I like to show that all my palettes are getting a lot more love than they would have otherwise. Then we have how many pans that I hit this quarter. I hit 14 pans of eyeshadow. So we increased it by 1 from last quarter. I had only marked that I had 11, but in my actual like how many pans I've hit, I have 13 written through till February. So I definitely had numbers wrong last time. Sorry. I have 27 pans of eyeshadow hit though, whether it's in palettes or in my singles. So that's huge. We're halfway through the year and I've hit 27 pans of eyeshadow. What? The total number of eyeshadow pans in palettes that I have is 557 in palettes. Again, not including my single collection, but within those 557 palettes, I have used 136 individual shades within that just in Q2. Now, in total, I have used 256 of my eyeshadow palette pans. So that brings me to about 50 or 46%. It was right under, it was 45.9. I'm rounding that sucker up. 46% of my eyeshadow collection palettes have been touched. That is, again, huge. I'm doing this a lot. Gonna fly away. Now, this all to be said, there are 14 palettes in my collection that have still gone not used this year. So for the tail half of the year, that is going to be my main focus. Now, not to say that I'm not going to touch anything else that I've already touched this year, because I definitely double dip in shades. And I mean, I'm pretty darn proud of all of the color on this paper. There are things that were scribbled out because I depotted and then decluttered. If you missed my like Juvia's Place and single palette declutters, I'll link those in the description box, but I did declutter a bunch of those palettes and depotted them, so now they're like technically singles in my collection. But I'm really happy with where I am, where I'm going with this. So that is it for my palette usage for Q2. I've made leaps and bounds in my collection. I'm really proud of it. I would love to know how you're doing. If you are doing a no palette left behind or a no pan left behind style thing that you're just trying to like monitor your usage, let me know how it's going. Tag me in posts on Instagram. I love seeing that kind of stuff. I get so jazzed for you guys, seeing like the progress that you guys are doing and just seeing like you're using your makeup way better than I could use my makeup. So I love seeing that kind of stuff. But that is it for this video. I hope you guys are truly doing well. I hope you guys are staying healthy, sane, and safe. Be kind to someone, hug someone today, be nice, tell them you love them, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!